On the Shoulders of Dwarves, a weekly podcast about role-playing games.
Hello, and welcome to On the Shoulders of Dwarves, a weekly podcast about role-playing games and the gamers who game them. My name is Uri Lifshitz.
And I'm Aviv Manoach.
And we are missing today Eran, as he is way too busy currently being in MCM London Comic-Con, along with Aviv Or, and we wish them the best of luck. And we were actually thinking, okay, so Eran won't be here this week for a recording. What shall we do? And of course, the answer was obvious. We will discuss what to do when one or more of your players cannot arrive to the gaming session, much like we found ourselves here missing an Eran. I'm guessing pretty much every gaming party in the world have had that moment where you suddenly get a WhatsApp or an SMS or a phone call from one of the players saying, listen guys, something came up and I won't be able to make it. I'm really sorry. And you're sitting there and thinking, okay, now what? So I know most of you would be thinking, okay, the simplest solution would be just to cancel the game and then go home, wallow in your misery, and roll dice till you fall asleep.
That's a very bad solution.
Indeed, because that solution leads to less role-playing in your life. Yeah. And the entire purpose of life, as I see it, is to have more role-playing in your life. So while canceling the game is a fair option, you can use this time to play a different one-shot game, switch to a board game, watch a movie, or simply go as a group and throw stones at the absent player's house. All are amazingly fun activities. And if you're thinking about having a one-shot game, may I suggest Good Society, the Jane Austen role-playing games, which I will talk about later on, but it's awesome.
On the Shoulders of Dwarf does not endorse violence against absentee players.
Not at the moment, no. However, we would usually prefer to actually role-play and enjoy the gaming night. I would suggest beforehand, before arriving to this critical junction, perhaps have a rule in place to what do we do if one or more of our players cannot make it to the game night.
I think it should maybe be as part of your expectation management. Talk about what are you going to do if someone can't make it. And we are going to suggest those solutions. So pick one and do it from the beginning of your campaign, however long you play together. And if a different situation arises through time, you can change your mind afterward.
Indeed. I currently have two gaming groups and we have similar rules. One of them is the leave no player behind rule, meaning if one of us cannot arrive to a gaming night, we cancel the game. We would do something else, but we will not play without any players missing. Now, it's important to mention that this is a small group. This is a GM plus 4 players, and we run a pretty tightly knit party. So if one of the players cannot make it, we just cancel the gaming night. And this is understood and accepted by all players. However, in my other gaming group, we have the optional missing player rule, which means if a player cannot make it, he has the option of saying, but go ahead, play without me. We would not suggest that. It's the absent player's choice. I feel that in that way, the player does not feel like he's left outside of the loop. And if it's actually something that happened in his own fault or a problem at home or whatever, he doesn't have to carry the burden of guilt of, oh my God, I have ruined this evening for all my friends, etc. Or on the other hand, if he feels like this would harm the continuation of the game and the adventure and the immersion of the other players, he can say, okay, I'm sorry, my bad. Let's cancel tonight and move on. So if a player is missing, we give the optional choice of canceling that gaming session to that specific player.
Both in my current group and my past one, we had an agreement about what to do when someone can't make it. Both of them use the play anyway rule because they are both difficult games to schedule and play. The first one, the previous group, was an online game played across 3 different continents. So if someone could make it, we play anyway, unless it was a critical moment in the story, in the campaign, and that was for the GM to decide. We generally followed the rule of GM plus 2 players. That means that if we have a group of 5, GM plus 4 players, and 2 people can't make it, we are still going to play. But if if only 1 player is left, there is no reason to play. I use this same rule in my current group, which I GM. This is a text-based game, so the reason we are using the play anyway rule is because the sessions are slower than normal games because they are text-based. So if we started canceling sessions, the story will progress very slowly. So if someone say they can make it, we play anyway, unless the group together decide that it's not a good time anyway, and we can cancel this session because there are other conditions to consider beside the player being missing.
It's a rule that I like a lot because it sets a good threshold. If some people can't make it to the session, fine. As long as we have enough to play, then we can play. If not, then we cancel it, which is very nice. However, let us move on, assuming that you have decided to play, because role-playing is life, etc. So you're there, you, the GM, the players, and you're missing one. The most important question is, how do you deal with this situation? What do you do with the missing player's character? And there's a whole range of possibilities here.
The first way to deal with it, and my personal, I won't say favorite, but what we do in my group, is to ignore the character. We just assume they are not in this scene, they are still part of the party. They haven't gone anywhere, they are just not on the stage at the moment. So we are not talking to them, we are not using their mechanical benefits, they are just not there. But the next session, when we are still in the same dungeon and the players return, the character will be there. We are not going to go through the machinations of bringing his character back into this 4D level dungeons we have been into for a month.
So it's not that you just ignore the existence of the character, you remove that character from existence for the duration of this specific gaming session.
Yeah, the important thing to remember here is that we are not trying to make up a story reason why the character is not there.
You're not looking for an in-game justification. Yes. You simply say, okay, it's an out-of-game problem. We're going to use an out-of-game solution.
Exactly.
A second way of approaching this is simply to have that character played by the GM as an NPC. Now, it has several very distinct benefits. Number one is that the character remained inside the game, can assist in tactical game. This is very, very important because the removal of one of the player characters leave a big hole. Also, it helps a lot with immersion. If currently we are in a specific situation and this character is there, so I can continue to rely on that character's existence and abilities and narrative devices if they are being used. If we are doing this because it was very important for this specific character, then we can continue.
Yeah, I will say that in my games, especially the more fantasy adventuring type, we used a shared equipment document or list or something like that. So even if we use the ignore the character solution, players can still use whatever magic items or potion or artifacts or story items the group has, even if they are considered to be on the possession of the missing player's character.
Gotcha.
This is to resolve stuff like we need the sacred disc.
Which is currently in the bag of holding held by him, which is not here.
Yeah, exactly. This is done, and I think all of these methods are done because we want to facilitate progress in the game. We don't want the external circumstance, if we already decided we want to play, to stop us from moving forward in the game. And the third method that you can use is to share the character between the other players, let the party as a whole make decisions about how they act. I would use it more on a tactical, mechanical basis and try not to make story and personality decision about the character unless you know that the other player has very specific things he wants to do with the character and you feel it's appropriate. But tread carefully in that regard.
Yeah, a player's character is his own. I have to say that many times as a GM, I refuse to play a player's character. I think it's something that shouldn't be taken lightly. But on the other hand, me as a player have no problems of, including with my current campaign, to tell the GM, fine, yeah, you play him. Most of my characters are easily played from a character's perspective, because I build characters for specific purposes, which are usually not very mechanical oriented. So it's very easy to know what my character would do. This is a stupid decision. Bester would probably support this, for example.
2 years ago, Eran was a player in my campaign, and he played a dwarf barbarian that mainly did one thing: charge forward. So when he wasn't available, it was very easy to take his character and do what Eran will do in the game.
So you're saying it's not as much a character trait as a timer. Okay, you have 4 minutes to come to a decision before the dwarf barbarian charge forward. Go ahead.
It wasn't like that in that campaign, but the campaign afterward, we had a paladin that did exactly that. Whenever the group argued about something, he would just charge forward. It was beautiful. He died valiantly in the end.
As paladin often do. Now we're sitting at our game tonight. We have a player missing, but we already decided to play. The question is, what to play? You do not have to play a regular gaming session that would advance the plot and possibly leave the missing player behind. You can use this opportunity to have one of numerous different kinds of gaming session. You can use this opportunity if you have an ample warning in advance to bring in a substitute player or a guest player to supplement your numbers, which is a beautiful way of solving this issue. For example, if you're missing the player who plays the cleric, you can invite a friend over to play a different cleric who joined you just for the opportunity of this specific gaming session. Find in-game reasons if you must, or simply accept things as they are. As we said, this is an out-of-game problem, and maybe the best solution for it could be an out-of-game solution.
I believe you did this in the past?
I've done it numerous times. I love surprising my players, and if I know that one of the players is not coming, I would bring in special guests to play either that specific player character if they're friends and know each other, or different characters with same tactical roles so the game could progress.
The next option is to have either a one-shot or a couple of sessions if the player is absent more than once, with different characters in the same settings to polish and expand your campaign setting. You can play NPCs that you have already met. You can play a different party of characters that are doing something else in the same time period. Anything at all that will give you more flavor to your regular game.
It's an excellent world building exercise, which I highly recommend in any game, even if all the players are present. I specifically enjoy letting my players in these special sessions play the villains.
Mm-hmm.
I give them a 2-sentence description of the villains and have them meet in an evil league of evil council sort of thing. And I give one of the sentences is usually the description of the villain, and the second sentence is what they're trying to achieve in this meeting. And then they just play the meeting and argue with each other. And that's wonderful because as a GM, it gives me a lot of tools to make the other side very interesting.
Yes. And oftentimes your player will screw themselves over a lot worse than you ever could have.
Yep, it's true. It's one of the first rules of GMing that nothing you can do would harm the party more than the players. That's the truth right there. Another wonderful option is to have a flashback session for the characters whose players are present. This could be, okay, let's take 10 minutes for each character and have a flashback with that player describe how his character, gone through his night training, grew up in that isolated farm, was kidnapped by that mage who taught him how to write and cast spells and whatnot. This is a wonderful chance to deepen the characters, like we suggested doing to the world around them.
Yeah.
I love doing the Chibit version of your characters. And for those who don't know anime, that means just taking them and presenting them as little boys and girls and do that little special episode about that time they were traveling in the woods and that one broke his leg and they were looking for something, and just to give basic past to your characters if they have a common past. If not, the rest of the party can play NPCs in the story of one of those players, and then we move to a different player and their character, etc. It's a very, very, very fun activity for any game, and I highly recommend it.
Yeah. If you play a game that has some sort of bonds or relationship, like Apocalypse world-based games, Dungeon World Mask, it is assumed that each of the characters had prior connections to the beginning of your campaign, so you can use them to play a type of origin story, especially if you play some sort of heroic, more modern type of game. You can actually play the origin story of before the party teamed up together. And the last idea we'll talk about is to have a filler sessions. That is to say, we play the same characters in the same campaign, but we are not going to advance the plot in these sessions. We are going to sit around the tavern, the fire, the dungeon room, which hopefully is empty, the local bowling alley, and talk about stuff and think about and try to figure out what the villains are doing and stuff like that without actually going out and doing things. I actually had a session like this without prior arrangements. The previous session in the campaign had some very tough and deep moral choices done by one of the characters, and the next sessions they left the area, they returned to the place where they made camp, and for most of the session they just spent the night arguing about what they have done.
Of course, filler sessions can be loads of fun and can be in various other activity. The characters go to market. The characters have a fun vacation on the hot springs of Mount whatever. The characters are going to watch a play. The characters are going to watch a movie. The characters are discussing moral issues, like you mentioned. The characters are playing a card game, and everyone around the table actually playing cards, but in character.
The character got drunk, got thrown into jail, and are now spending the night in jail without anywhere to go.
Always fun. So we had our game. It was fun. It was glorious. It was the top of the week. And now we need to understand, how do we keep the missing player updated on whatever it was we did. So for my first group, there's a very simple solution, because we record our session. I have a voice recorder, and I simply put it on the table and I record the duration of the session. So if one of the players is missing, I can simply send them the file and they can listen to everything they've missed, which is a very, very easy solution.
But time consuming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed.
On the same vein, my group plays via online text chat. So technically, the missing player can go into the chat app and scroll upward and just read everything that happened. Technically, they don't do it, but they can.
It's a good option, even if you don't usually do it. If in the next session something strikes you as odd, you can always scroll up and then check out what you've missed.
We do it a lot. The program we play in Discord, it has a search function. If anyone want to remember something that happened anytime in our game, we can just search for it. It's excellent.
You can also use various hashtags like PC killed hashtag. So if you want to see who was the last player who was killed, you can simply look for that, etc.
Yes.
Now, I find it very, very, I don't know if nice is the word, but very accommodating if you pick one of the other players to be in charge of updating the absent player. You know, you're just wrapping up and you just go and say, John, can you make sure that Dave know everything that happened? Because if you don't do that, it's kind of Dave has to make sure that somehow he will get the information, and he doesn't know who to call, and doesn't want to bother anyone, and he feels shitty already for missing the game night. So, you know, I think it's the nicer option to have someone in charge of getting the absent player up to date.
Yeah, it's also like the bystander effect. If you don't give someone specific to do it, no one will think about doing it because they will assume someone else will do it. So get around the group.
Agree.
Yeah, get around the group. If that's your thing, each time get someone else to do it. In my group, we don't have players keeping track of things. I, as the GM, do it. It became a thing because the players started forgetting stuff, and I remember all the things we play. So I just started writing session summary and giving them to the player at the start of the session. And we also have a file with all the session summaries tracked.
Now, there are many other options who might include, like Aviv just mentioned, the session summaries, which if you don't do, I highly suggest doing. It's a lovely, lovely memento of your gaming sessions. Another great option is to use weekly questions. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the terms, a weekly question is a question posted either by the GM or one of the players to the group, and everyone answers usually as their character. Things like, what was your favorite moment about the last session? And, you know, everyone answer as their character, and it's a great, great tool to give extra depth to your character and to the events that took place during the gaming session. So simply make sure that when you have a player absent, those questions are more informative regarding events that took place during the gaming session, so that the players reading the answer would get a sense of what happened and how the party reacted.
Yes, exactly. I usually use weekly questions as a way to expand on what happened. For example, last session, we completed a fight against, we are playing a superhero campaign. We completed a fight against a villain. The team escaped without being seen. And then I asked them, what did the media report about the incident? And
Good one.
they could add all sorts of things. For example, they added that the villain they fought wasn't found by the police despite being knocked out. He escaped. That's one of the responses I got. I mentioned we are playing superheroes. We are using a system called Masks, a New Generation by MyPay Games. And one of the tools Masks suggests the GM to use is called a love letter. A love letter is both a narrative tool and a mechanic tool because the examples they give is actually some form of letter to the character of the player that wasn't in the session. And in this short letter, you are describing what happened to them and what is their current situation, and then you give them a move, a type of mechanical rule to use to resolve the situation. So you assume that the character that was missing, something happened to them, and you are going to play very quickly with one or two rolls of the dice how it was resolved. And then we are getting back to the next sessions, and the team had what happened to them, and the character that was missing had something unique happen to them in the meanwhile. And it's a nice tool to get the players involved and have the missing player add something despite not being able to participate in the game.
Cool. Was not aware of that. Okay, we hope you've listened to this episode and got exactly what to do in the case of a player is missing. But here's another issue. What to do when it is the GM who can't make it? Now, like in previous option, you can always cancel the gaming session. But you can also have what we used to call a campfire session. That is when all the players meet without the GM and have a gaming session comprised of all characters just having an evening of conversation around the campfire, hence the name a campfire session. It's an excellent tool to deepen characters' background and relationship. And unlike a filler episode where it is with the encouragement and suggestion of the GM, a campfire session is usually something supported by the players. It's something that can happen between two players. They're simply saying, okay, we have this discussion. There wasn't enough time to do it during the session. Let's have a campfire session between the two of us. But it can happen, again, with all players present, simply as a way of resolving the GM-less night of gaming. Now, I can tell you both as a GM and as a player, the time where I actually took part in campfire sessions were amazing. As a GM, I wasn't present, but I felt so much pride that the game is so good that it continues even without me. Mm-hmm. It's like we've created something that transcends the regular game mechanic of a GM narrating a world to the players who act in it. I think it's one of the highest compliments a group of players can pay to a GM, telling them that this game is so important to us that we're going to play it even if we don't have you to guide us because you did such a great work so far in getting us interested and hooked on this idea. And as a player, it's just fun.
I haven't had the chance to either participate as a player or have one of those sessions as a GM. We do have a separate channel in our gaming chat for in-character discussion. So sometimes players will leave the main session chat and just discuss things among characters. That's how in my previous campaign there was a romance between two characters, which was the first time for me. It was excellent. But an actual session just for in-character discussion without GM, that I didn't get a chance to experience yet.
Well, good luck. May you never have a GM-less night, but still, I think it's a fun thing to have regardless. That has been our show for tonight. Thank you very much. If you like us, then please rate us on iTunes. Tell your friends to listen to us. Give us a like on our Facebook page, Facebook/Dwarf Podcast. Drop us an email at show@dwarfcast.net, or you can find us, as I said, in the Facebookses and the Twitterses. And of course, have fun. We will now continue to Taking the Load Off. Taking the Load Off is the part of the show where we share stories and insights from our role-playing lives. Aviv, you want to go first?
Okay. So I've said a bunch of things about my current campaign, my regular group. We are playing Masks: A New Generation. Using a specific adaptations I wrote called Wonders, Heroes of Tomorrow, which incidentally just finished crowdfunding.
Finished a very successful crowdfunding.
Yeah, about 10 days ago. No, just a week ago, actually. In the Israeli community, we took the rules set of Masks and wrote some new content for it and some new rules. We have some original way to create the city in which you play superheroes, because Mask has its own playset called Halcyon City, and we wanted a way for people to write a city of their own, kind of like how Dresden Files and let you write a city for Dresden Files. So we have this system and used it successfully for a couple of games, and this is the first full-length campaign I started using this adaptation, and it's a lot of fun so far. We had 3 sessions, and last night I started updating an Obsidian portal for the campaign. So if you want to check it out and read about the city we created and the session we had, you can.
And of course, there will be a link in the show notes. As for me, this week, my wife had a birthday, and we decided to celebrate in an English style. So we had a dinner, and everyone prepared traditional English dishes of various sorts. And we decided to play a game of Good Society, the Jane Austen role-playing game, which just recently came out after a very, very successful Kickstarter campaign. We obviously will give links in the show notes, but I have to say that it was an amazing experience. I spent the last week learning the mechanics of the game and how to run a game, and we've met 5 players and a GM, and it always amazes me how, when the mechanic is well thought out and tailored to what you want to achieve, it encouraged the players to create that very same feeling and atmosphere and moments and scenes that the genre would want to have. And that is a very well tailored system for a very, very specific kind of game. We will probably do an episode in the future where we're going to discuss Good Society in depth from the mechanical aspects. But I just have to say that there are various concepts of how to create your major characters and the connections that that character have, and the relationship between all those characters, and the desires that each character had that lead to those intrigue which we learn to associate with Jane Austen and the entire Regency period. So again, it constantly amazes me that a good mechanic would get you the game that you want to have. Okay, that has been our show, and we will conclude it by saying goodbye, each in their own native tongue. So, להתראות!
On the Shoulder of Dwarves is shared under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial form. The intro and outro are taken from Silly Fun by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution Free. Find us at dwarvecast.net and follow us on Twitter or Facebook.